You are welcome.
Okay. Afternoon. This is December 5th, Mobile Home Task Force meeting, our next to last. We have one more coming up, should be on the middle of December. But actually, a pretty interesting agenda that kind of came together, kind of one part kind of quickly at the end, but another part that I found interesting. The first thing on the agenda is going to be from Rachel McLeod is going to speak with us from the Vermont State Employees Credit Union. And this goes back to a issue that I thought we wrapped up, but apparently we hadn't, which was the difference between or mobile homes being classified as either real estate or personal property. And it has to do with loans and taxes and things like that. So I thought we had a pretty good understanding of that when we had a presentation where the attorneys presented the statutes and the court cases back a few weeks. And also we had a printout from the tax department, all of which is on the website if you wish to find out more about those. But then at the last minute or a week or so ago, so it's not the last minute, we still have a month to go, I was contacted by Rachel McLeod, and she had an issue that she wanted to talk to me about, or she emailed about. And I said, why not present it to the whole committee so that we all understand the issues involved? At the same time, I was working with one of the mobile home dealers trying to get a better understanding of what happens when a person actually purchases a home. When you go in and say, I want to buy a home, what are my options? What are my options in homes? What are my options in financing? And what kind of taxes do I pay? So I've been working with them trying to put together what's kind of a narrative of a person going through that. And it got confusing and had to be, but the dealer actually went to his attorney and said, how does this work? And the attorney's gotten back to me. Some of this I've forwarded to task force members just very within the last hour or so. And I apologize for it being so late, but it's just information that you might use. And we hope to clarify some of that during this meeting. So that's where we stand with that issue. And Rachel's going to talk about that. Then we're going to hear from Peter Snyder of Efficiency Vermont. He's going to, I noticed I went through the charges again. Anytime I'm bored, I go through the charges and make sure that we're sticking to them. And one of the charges that has to do with modern construction was very specific and said we needed to find out about efficiency and durability of mobile homes. So Peter Snyder's going to come in and talk about efficiency and durability of mobile homes to kind of wrap that subject up. And then quite by accident, I discovered just by doing a Google search that VTrans is working on a project that involves mobile home parks. So a representative from VTran, Kyle Openauer, is going to come in and talk to us about some really interesting reports that are actually up on the website as well. If you want to know about the history of mobile home parks, and if you want to see great graphics of where parks are located and things like that, those two reports are very good for that. And it has to do surprisingly with well, it may not be surprising to some people. It is to me, who's over 70, that mobile homes parks might be classified as historic places because they're over 50. And that kind of opens up to me another whole issue involving, okay, what happens when you're building a highway or expanding a highway through what might be a historic place? Or what kind of funding might that open up? Questions like that, which Kyle might be able to answer. So he's going to briefly go over some of the issues involved with that. He's not going to pick through the reports. They're very lengthy reports, but they're very well done. And if you have a chance to look at them, they're very informative. So I think, and then we get to, after VTrans, the latter part of the meeting, this 2.5 hour meeting, we're going to look at recommendations which each of you might have, because we have to start narrowing down the focus for the report, which is due January 15th. We have 10 more days until the next meeting where we are going to kind of pass a lot of this off to our attorney, who's going to start busily writing up the report. So we'll go over the recommendations you've made. I've also have a couple of my own, and I've also started putting together the executive summary, and we might talk about what might be in the executive summary as well. So we'll see what kind of time we have. If there's extra time at the bottom of the agenda, there's also, we still haven't really talked about Westbury Village, and it's becoming a village or a municipality, official municipality. So Gail might be able to, there's a document about that we also have on the website. And Gail Pezzo might be able to talk a little bit about that. So that's the meeting. We'll get started now from Vermont State Employees Credit Union. Rachel McLeod, take it over.
Okay, great. I guess just quickly, I am a mortgage operations supervisor, and I do have some of my fellow supervisors on the call. I plan to do the presenting, but if you guys have any questions at any point, certainly any one of us can jump in. So just wanted to let you know who the others are on the call. And I could do intros if you'd like, or I can just move on to the presentation. Either way is fine.
Why don't you just spin through the names so we make sure that we can, what their title is, and then go ahead.
Okay, sure. So also joining me are Abby Jeffress and Annie Rogers. They are mortgage origination supervisors. And then we have Heather Williams, who's a mortgage underwriting supervisor, and Beth Daly, who's a secondary market supervisor with us. Okay, so I think the first topic I'll start with is just the terms mobile home versus manufactured home for us who are in lending. That seems to be the easier, quicker topic. So for us, mobile homes are related to homes that were manufactured prior to June 15th, 1976. We find that most lenders don't actually lend on homes fabricated before then. And, you know, our investors like Fannie and Freddie, FHA, will also not lend on anything dated prior to that. And so, you know, when you refer to mobile home, it's something that we won't even finance. And I would say most lenders can't speak for all. I will have a handout that just kind of shows you, you know, that's according to the HUD guidelines, which is, you know, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The reason why I think we all follow the HUD guidelines is, you know, those homes that were fabricated after June 15th, 1976 follow their construction HUD code. And so it's kind of a safety and habitability thing. Any questions on that at all?
But if you, just to be clear, if I go to a dealer and buy a mobile home, the dealer says, most people are not savvy to the 1976 borderline. So if I go to a dealer and the dealer says, I have mobile homes, and then the buyer is not thinking, oh, those are pre-76. He's thinking whatever's on your lot. And when he buys it, he goes to a lender and says, I have a mobile home I'd like to get a mortgage on. The lender knows enough to say, what year was it built? So the question is it really would it be worth changing statute so that we do consistently call them manufactured homes, or whether we could just leave it as mobile homes? And that's kind of the question that we were trying to work on. Does it really make a difference to the way you work, whether people call it a mobile home or a manufactured home?
Probably not necessarily. You're right. We're going to do our due diligence to ensure that it's a home that was fabricated after that date and then
Okay.
move forward to lending. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you.
And I guess just to further that, the way that we would confirm, that it meets HUD guidelines too, is we have an inspection performed by a real estate appraiser. They aid us in confirming that property compliance, and then of course, condition and value. And during the inspection, the appraiser confirms that there's a HUD certification label attached to the home and also a HUD data plate. So anyway, just an FYI there. Moving on to the real property versus personal property. So this one's kind of a harder one to explain, but the biggest hurdle for us as a lender, we're finding, is that almost all homes in a park are to be considered personal property. And we felt it was important to share it with you, because if this is a hurdle for us, then certainly it could be a hurdle for other lenders trying to do mortgages in a park. I guess how we concluded that they're considered personal property is because they've been conveyed for the most part via a bill of sale only. There's no warranty deed. In reviewing loans that Legacy VSECU closed year to date in 2023, 22 out of 23 homes were conveyed via a bill of sale. And just to give you an idea of who the sellers were in those transactions, so 4 out of 21 were between a manufactured home dealer and a buyer. The rest were between existing homeowners and a buyer. So it seems as though the seller of the home doesn't necessarily impact the conveyance document used. For us as a lender, the concern there is when the home is conveyed via a bill of sale, a security agreement has to be used rather than a mortgage deed. Security agreements are used for consumer loan financing of personal property, not mortgage loans, right? So that's kind of where we're getting tripped up in the mortgage department. So just to kind of why we started really digging into this just recently is because, so VSECU and NEFCU, we finalized our merger during the month of November. VSECU has offered financing for manufactured homes in a park for years. We learned this week with the mortgage document provider that we're going to use as a combined institution that they won't support the security agreement that we need for our mortgage closing packages. And so what that means to us is our document provider won't ensure the following things. So they're not going to ensure that most, if not all, data maps from our mortgage software to the document itself. They won't be ensuring the data flowing to the document is compliant. The data that flows to, they won't be ensuring that the data continues to flow as it should through any mortgage software or document provider software updates, which happen pretty regularly. And then finally, they won't be ensuring that the document itself is the most current compliant version of the document. The security agreement itself, it's a pretty complicated compliance document, and it's not one we would necessarily want to maintain or hand type. That would be potentially dangerous for us. So in terms of other implications of a home being determined to be personal property or treated as such, there are other compliance implications for us. So such as mortgage lenders are required to provide certain disclosures to borrowers. For loans that are originated on or after October 15th, 2015, lenders are required to use the TILA-RESPA disclosures, which many people aren't necessarily familiar with, but they're the loan estimate and the closing disclosure. Our compliance department had concluded that if a home is to be handled as personal property, those TILA-RESPA disclosures really aren't an appropriate form of disclosure. And so what we're using, or what VSECU was using up until this point, was disclosures dated pre that 2015 date, which is good faith estimate, truth in lending disclosure, and a HUD settlement statement. I mean, while that's working, it's an older form of disclosure that, less staff and less borrowers are familiar with. You with me so far? Is a lot of detail.
Yeah. Well, can we go back one sec? I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Senator Wendy Harrison, Rachel. Thank you for this. About 3 minutes before now, you had a list of all the things that that you won't be insured for, which sounded to me like you wouldn't be able to make those loans.
Yeah, I mean, we've potentially got some other options that I was going to present to you all, but it's like we're literally working through this in real time. Like this past week is when we confirmed that our document provider won't be able to support us with that document.
So it's just
literally all happening.
Wow, so that's huge. So our timing is either good or bad. So when you say document provider, is that like a software company as opposed to
it's very much both, in that these document providers, they work with the mortgage software. They kind of they very much work together. And so like when there's an update in the mortgage software, they're making sure that company's making sure the document provider is aware of anything coming, and they're kind of working together on, I don't know the correct terms, but the programming of it. So there's that. And then, the document provider has a website, an application that we go to, and we can tweak documents to some degree. We can't impact anything that's compliance related per se.
So will all document providers have these same limitations?
Not necessarily. So VSECU's current document provider, or previous, maybe I should say, they were able to create this document for them and support it for them. The one we just happened to decide to go with cannot.
Okay, so it might not be as bad of news as it sounded to me.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the
helpful.
only thing is, from our perspective, it would be a huge lift to change document providers, because we would have to build out every single document that we currently work with. But that's a me issue, us issue.
Oh, well, and that matters because you're a lender. So that matters to all of us. So, we care. So thank you. Okay. So yes, thanks.
Yeah. So I guess one thing we were considering, and again, we've just barely started discussing next steps, is, could we require that a warranty deed be drawn up for all our purchases, for instance, in a park? If we went this route, I think about, if we think about the scenarios that we have to consider. So for the purchase of an existing home in a park, that might work. A hurdle might be the fact that the warranty deed is usually drawn up by a seller's attorney. And, this is a question that I would have is there typically a seller's attorney involved with a manufactured home in a park purchase? I don't know that that's always the case. Somebody's got to draw up the bill of sale. Somebody's got to drop the property transfer tax return. Ideally, there's some sort of, I guess, probably a UCC search. So hopefully a seller usually engages a seller's attorney, and they could drop that warranty deed, but we haven't dug in too far into that yet. When it's a purchase of a new home in a park, I don't know the answer to this either. You know, is it compliant to require a warranty deed if, as of the closing date, there might not be a home yet delivered and set up? Like that might actually happen after the closing date. So that's, you know, a question we've got to work through to be able to offer a loan program where the home might be set on the lot post-closing. And then with refinance transactions, again, if all these home buyers are using a bill of sale for conveyance, I think we would have to potentially require that bill of sale conversion process, which as of yet, anyone I've spoken with has never done one, nor fully know the process beyond what's on the statute. And so, you know, our concern would be, you know, how cumbersome is that for our borrower? You know, how long would that take? In a perfect world, I would say if that conversion could literally happen at the same time as our refinance closing, where, you know, if we can get that stamp of approval, or I guess, you know, I'd have to look at the statute again, but yeah, I mean, could it be done simultaneously with the recording of the refinance mortgage deed and newly drawn up warranty deed? That would be ideal, timing wise.
Yeah, I've been picking through the statute the last couple of days, trying to understand that. And the conversion portion of the title is really, it's a little bit questionable. It says, you know, if it's a bill of sale and if it's also it's as if both loans were at the same time. Or you have a real estate and you have a personal, then you can convert. But how you start with one and then without the other. It says something like if it's financed by real estate and you have a warranty, then you can switch it. And you have a bill of sale, then you can switch it to a warranty. But how do you manage to finance it as real estate if you just have a bill of sale? So it is kind of questionable, which probably needs to be looked at a lot more carefully by somebody who knows more about the way that works than myself. I had a question though on but does anybody else, any of the other members that are present have experience with people buying and selling homes such that they know the process of closing? In a park, do people the same way we do with most real estate, where you go to a lawyer's office and sit down and exchange papers? And is it that formal or not? I guess I'm wondering if anybody else has some experience with that. Gail, go ahead.
At Westbury, we encourage people to get a seller and a buyer to get their own attorneys. Often when it's a cash sale, people don't really understand the process. It's not like purchasing someone's car. So they do go to a formal closing. And the bill of sale is presented at the closing, and then we, as the co-op, request that we see that bill of sale to make sure that the person is now the owner of that mobile home.
So if somebody is selling a home at Westbury and say they want $30,000 for it, you know, somebody comes in with cash, they still have a closing and produce a bill of sales.
Correct.
That just filed with you and goes through okay.
For them to get approval and be able to enter the lot, we need to see the bill of sale. That's really for the safety and to prevent any what is that called? Squatting,
What? Yeah. And
to make
is
sure
there,
that that person owns that home.
and any deed, the warranty deeds that you know of where it's actually been treated as real estate?
When you had asked me that, I kind of looked into it. The only thing, we've had 71 new homeowners since we became co-op, and it's all a bill of sale. And the most recent person, because the home was under 4 years old, and they were provided the Champlain Housing Trust program, and they didn't have a deed either. It was a bill of sale, and it was also I forget what that's called. Let me just look for it. A bill of sale, no deed, title opinion letter, and the owner title insurance policy, Schedule B, Part 1, exceptions from coverage. Those were the documents that she received at closing.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. Mary, did you have something you wanted to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, Tri-Park follows a similar process, but people don't always adhere to it. So we do still get squatters. I mean, the theory is good, but the practice is not perfect.
Any other comments from people on that? Okay. Back to you, Rachel, if you have more to add.
Okay. I mean, I think I would just add that, you know, in terms of this process for us to get where we're at now, you know, we did go around and around for a while, and it felt a little bit like a chicken or the egg thing, where in the end, I believe it's Title IX that kind of trumps everything in terms of having, you know, to follow, I guess, the bill of sale guidelines versus, you know, otherwise, we certainly would like to treat all of them as real estate, right? That would be our end game, our goal. And then, you know, I don't know, we'll see where this goes, certainly, in terms of us, if we could feasibly require a warranty deed going forward. Yeah, I think that's everything. And then, you know, I mean, we just want to be able to do these loans initially. You know, eventually we'll start digging into more the secondary market and what their guidelines are for parks and co-ops. I think, you know, we did some very preliminary research and found that it might be a hard no for any homes in a park, but potentially possible for co-ops. But again, we've barely dug into that at this point. And I didn't know, Kurt, if you wanted me to talk about at all the secondary market, even on a basic level, like why in a perfect world a lender sells loans to the secondary market.
Chris Delia went over that a little bit when he spoke with us, basically saying that that's the way they capitalize their loaning is by selling the mortgages to the secondary market. If you have more to add than that, that would be fine. You still got some time.
Okay. I mean, yeah, pretty much that's it. You know, it gives us, selling loans to the secondary market, it benefits both us and the borrower in that, you know, increases our liquidity, allowing them to continuously originate and fund loans. It's greater availability of mortgage loans, expands the opportunities for our home buyers by creating, for us, that steady stream of money that lenders can use to create mortgages. You know, the secondary market also, you know, offers longer loan terms, or can, which are generally a riskier asset, makes them more available, which can make, you know, the monthly payment more affordable for borrowers. So anyway. I think that's really all I had to
Okay,
go.
Paul, we have a question from Polly Major.
Hi, Rachel. Polly Major. I'm from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and I sit on the task force. I'm just wanted to clarify, because the secondary market was a hard no, are you the loans that you do issue for mobile homes or manufactured homes, are those held in-house or portfolio loans, and kind of what is the impact on the terms and the interest rate?
Yeah, so if it's on owned land, we are selling those to the secondary market. For the ones in a park, VSCCU up until this point has kept those in portfolio. Yeah. And, those interest rates for those homes in a park are a little higher than the saleable ones. And the terms, like for instance, on a saleable loan, Freddie and Fannie, their loan to value goes quite high. I think you can go as high as 95% for a conventional loan. I'd have to look. And, you've got private mortgage insurance availability as well. I think we started to look into private mortgage insurance, for instance, for ones in a co-op, and they follow Freddie and Fannie guidelines. The private mortgage insurance companies do. I imagine they might limit the loan to value more potentially. But again, we didn't dig too far there.
Well, thank you for all the digging you have done on this and all the thinking you're putting into how to make it work.
Okay, thanks.
And go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks again for all of your work and explaining these things to us. So aside from loans, is there anything else that you've noticed in this world? Because we're trying to make mobile homes more accessible, more functional, and just do what we can for the folks who live in the communities and for the communities themselves. So is there anything else that you've noticed that you would recommend us to either do or know about or think about for the future?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we out of the gate, currently we're not planning to require lenders title insurance on these loans. That's, trying to take into consideration affordability for the home buyer or the owner. The downside, I guess, of that might be that borrower wouldn't have owner's title insurance available, but maybe that's not needed so much, right? Because what kind of title issues might you run into when it's leasehold anyway? So that's, I guess, something to consider. Mortgage guidelines in general are more stringent with these homes, just making sure they do meet those HUD guidelines. And so, like, if you dig in further into Freddie and Fannie guidelines, if somebody puts something as little as a porch on a home, they want to make sure that that doesn't impact the structural integrity of the home. And then we as a lender, at least for the ones saleable to Freddie and Fannie, have to require a structural engineer go out and inspect that. So that's obviously an additional cost to a homeowner. So, there's definitely some ins and outs. When I was I actually talked to Jim Fecteau from Fecteau Homes, and we were talking out, the property transfer tax requirements. Those are a little ambiguous for us. So, I don't know what comes up. You guys have a lot on your plate. I'll give you that. You have a lot to work on. But we found ourselves kind of going around and around on that a little bit too, for the various scenarios that we run into. For instance, when that home is placed after the mortgage closing or after the fact, they might get charged sales tax up front, but then they have to pay property transfer tax later. Again, I didn't fully wrap my head around it, but it might be something, I guess, to consider and look into.
Okay, and then I guess just one last question. So is the credit union planning on continuing to be a lender in this area?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a follow-up question on that.
Go ahead, Sandrine.
Yes, so you are willing to still be a lender, but it is still your practice to consider manufacturer's home as a personal property, right? This is you will you still work on seeing if it's possible to have it turn into a real estate, actually.
Yeah.
No,
So
mortgage. Yeah.
those are the hurdles we still have to work through. So, is there a short-term solution and is there a long-term solution, right? So, a long-term might be we have to find a new document provider, but again, to be able to do them as personal property. But that would be a huge lift. That would take us quite a while because we have to build out all our documents all over again for every loan program. The warranty deed option would be a short term. And again, we just started this conversation. So it's like, where does it go? I mean, is there something that we haven't thought of yet?
Okay. And the bit of cell conversion is something that I know that it's unknown to you, but is it something that you are exploring in going through to see exactly what it requires in order for it to happen or not?
Well, it's hard because if you read it, there's so little information on it, and you're working with the town clerks. So I guess it's going to depend on each town, right? I mean, one way or another, we might have to figure this out. One way or another, we might have to figure it out.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, myself personally, I'm interested in long-term solutions. As if it doesn't, a short-term solution means it'll probably come up again in the long term. I kind of see this perhaps as a vestige of when coming from travel trailers 20, 30 years ago, that it's all kind of seen as a vehicle. That's a piece of personal property and hasn't quite transitioned into actually being a home. It would be interesting to look into how modular homes are characterized now. And, when somebody purchases a modular home from a factory as opposed to somebody purchasing a mobile home from a factory, would be how that's handled. And I gather there's construction loans involved at various parts along the way if it's actually being put together and shipped and things like that. So it is a complicated issue that we're not going to be able to solve. But I would like you to keep us in mind and think if you can come up with any legislative solutions or changes in statute that you think would clarify either existing statute or change existing statute to make it more transparent, more easy to use, then we'd certainly appreciate it. But we'll keep in communication and follow this for the next couple of weeks anyway, until we dissolve and see if there's anything that we can do.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Any more comments from the task force? Anybody else from the Employees Credit Union would like to add something? Otherwise, we'll leave it at that. Okay. Thank you very much for coming in. And if you're interested in the rest of the meeting, you're certainly welcome to stay. But otherwise, we'll be in touch for sure.
Okay, thanks a lot. Appreciate
Yep.
it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I noticed that Peter Snyder is in the room, so to speak, so we can switch to the next topic, which is efficiency and durability of mobile homes. Go ahead, Peter.
Hi, everybody. I was offering to answer any questions. I shared, Kurt, a number of documents with you and some information, I think, to help answer some questions you had. And yes, you let me know what you'd like me to share, or I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you need to be able to share your screen during this?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Well, Charlene will make it so.
Good.
Anybody have any quick questions to start us off, or we can go into a presentation? I mean, my basic question is, how do we measure what is the durability of contemporary? Specifically, I'm interested in ones that are sold now. I know Energy Efficiency Vermont has a target, and there's various models along the way with various levels of efficiency, but I'm interested in the durability and the efficiency of ones that are sold right now, or ones that are also being moved into parks right now, so that we have a good idea of how that works, especially compared to stick-built or modular homes.
Yes, great. Yeah, does anybody have any specific questions before I could just provide a little overview of where we're at today and what are some of the standards that could be met to improve, durability measures in homes?
Sounds like you can jump right in.
Okay. Yeah, so we are in a transitional period here. So there has been a new manufactured housing and construction standard, safety standard, that has been gone through the rulemaking process and has been adopted. It will be implemented after some additional work with regards to sort of oversight and quality assurance, quality control by 2025. The new Energy Star version 3, we're currently under the version 2 standard now. The version 2 will sunset as of January 1st of 2024, which is great. It's an improved Energy Star program that will be required as of the first of the new year. And then on top of that, we have the Zero Energy Ready Home standard that the Department of Energy released, a version 1 that we've been implementing, and a number of factories are delivering homes under that standard now, and even exceeding sort of the baseline of that standard. So, and on top of all that, we have homes that are being delivered throughout Vermont that still fall under basically the standards that were developed in 1994 for this housing space. So there's a great deal of variability out there with regards to durability, energy efficiency, indoor air quality, comfort, so forth. And it's really hard to say. We have a pretty high penetration of Energy Star homes, and that's a result of the down payment assistance program funded by the Housing Finance Agency and implemented by the Champlain Housing Trust. To qualify for that home ownership loan down payment assistance, the homes have to be Energy Star certified. So just looking back historically, this is changed over time. The penetration has grown, but today we're over 60% of homes that are delivered and deployed, new manufactured homes deployed in Vermont, represent the Energy Star certification. And so those homes do come with tighter duct systems, which I will just say, does factor into durability. We're not losing heating or cooling into that interstitial space, the belly underneath the home, which can really help significantly. Those homes are typically more airtight with regards to the building envelope, the floor, the walls, the roof, window and door installations. And they have some Energy Star equipment, Energy Star exhaust fans in the bathroom that perform better than the standard, and some Energy Star equipment. So we're pretty lucky in Vermont that, and we'll continue to see, as in the new year, even a better home, the Energy Star version 3 standard being required for those homes participating in that program.
Let me,
Yep, go ahead.
Let me ask you a specific question. And I realize that the HUD standards are performance standards as opposed to, what do they call, prescriptive. So, but currently coming into Vermont, there can still come in a mobile home that meets the 1994 standards.
Right.
Do those have 6-inch walls? Or are they?
Primarily, yes, they do. Yep, 2x6 walls with R19 fiberglass bats. They'll typically have an R22 floor, which will be bat insulation. Sometimes that is blown-in insulation, and then an R22 roof, and that's typically blown-in insulation, either fiberglass blown-in loose fill or cellulose. And
Okay.
they'll have, an R3 or so window. So that exceeds the HUD baseline standard. And to be honest, what we'll see with the new HUD construction and safety standard is that in the single section homes, also known as single wide, so the single box homes that are typically narrower and longer, there hasn't been a real improvement in that standard with regards to the new HUD construction and safety standard. They created a tiered approach to the new standard, and that happens in Energy Star version 3 as well. They have kept the standard for the single section homes low, which represents what I just described, which we're already seeing delivered to Vermont with our baseline homes. And then with the 2-section homes, they actually increased the R values associated with those homes. The idea being that the Department of Energy and the stakeholders that contributed to the development of the new standard wanted to keep the initial cost of the single section homes, which typically go to our lower income home buyers, keep them as low as possible. They didn't really factor in, right, life cycle costs, sort of, other costs associated with maintenance and energy burden. And that, the folks that could afford a 2-section home could afford those additional energy efficiency and durability upgrades that were included in the new standard. Energy Star version 3 took on that same tact, and they too have different standards, lower standards for the single section home than for the 2 or 3 section homes. So we just need to keep an eye out for that. The Zero Energy Ready Home Standard, and part of the reason that we've landed on that standard at Efficiency Vermont with regards to the advanced manufactured home program that we're developing is because it considers all both single and multi-section homes the same, and the same requirements carry across all different housing types.
Okay. Another question. I believe Vermont does have a statewide energy efficiency code for single family or for resident housing, which there's another group that's looking into this and trying to increase compliance to that, because I gather there isn't a lot of compliance to those energy codes. How do those apply to mobile homes? What's the comparison between the statewide energy efficiency codes and the current ones from HUD?
Well, our statewide residential building energy standard is higher with regards to its minimum insulation levels. There's an air tightness standard. So it is superior across the board with regards to all different characteristics and requirements. So, and I could show what those standards look like. So even with the new, I'll just say, even with our zero energy ready home target standard at Efficiency Vermont, which far exceeds what the next iteration of the HUD manufactured home standard, that still doesn't meet our bare minimum construction and energy efficiency standards for stick-built, modular, and panelized homes. And just for clarification purposes, the difference between the factory-built housing types, manufactured homes fall under that preemptive federal HUD standard, and they have to be delivered and permanently reside on a steel chassis or trailer. Modular homes built in a factory are delivered on a trailer, but they actually are lifted by a crane off of that trailer and set onto a permanent foundation system. The other factory built system that we commonly see is a panelization, and that's where a tractor trailer will deliver a bunch of sort of flat packed panels for everything from floors to walls to ceiling assemblies, and that's put together either with a lift or with a small crane and put together in panel systems. But they're all factory built. But panelization, modular, and stick-built homes, that is, homes that are built stick by stick in the field, those all fall under our residential building energy standard. Whereas, as you know, the manufactured homes on a steel chassis do fall under that federally preemptive standard.
So does that mean that we're bringing in manufactured homes that meet the HUD standard, but do not meet the standard of Vermont's energy codes? And is that a problem, or do our energy codes have a carve out for mobile homes or manufactured homes?
They're not dealt with in the state's residential building energy standard. They're a separate housing type that falls under their own separate HUD jurisdiction. So there's no call out. There's no language around manufactured homes, like there is for log homes, for instance. There's a carve out that deals specifically with log homes in our residential building energy standard. Manufactured homes reside strictly under the HUD manufactured housing construction and safety standard. Those homes are coming in at a lower level of efficiency. Some would argue certainly that there are some lower standards with regards to durability and construction methodologies associated with that housing. And that's in part based on the way these homes have been built in factories for a long time. And a lot of that is for transport down the road, because we have restrictions on what can, particularly in the Northeast, we have the strictest restrictions in the country. We can only travel down the road, without significant costs and permitting and sheriff escorts, under about 14 feet wide. It's actually 16 feet. Once you get over 14 feet, you can have sheriff escorts and get special permits. But staying under 14 feet, you avoid sheriff escorts. You have to be under 13 and a half feet in height. And that's due to our bridges that exist that truly are just over 13 and a half feet in many areas. So, as you're building within these sort of confines in a factory and delivering a completed house down the road, whether that's a single section or multi-section home, it has led to the industry only being able to meet certain, for instance, R values in the floor assembly or in the ceiling assembly, because they just can't accommodate, higher R values, bigger floor assemblies or larger roof assemblies to put that insulation in there. So there are some real challenges with regards to that.
So even modular homes built and brought into Vermont are not necessarily meeting the energy code, the statewide energy codes for Vermont?
That's actually not the case. So the modular homes do have to meet our codes, our bare minimum codes that you fall under that jurisdiction. And the modular homes often come at a lower level of completion. So for instance, the floor systems are not insulated and sheathed. And so, that can be done in the field, or they're put on basements, and those basements are the insulated assemblies as part of that home. The same with the roof systems. Very few modular homes are delivered with completed roof systems. They often come with what are called hinged tilt-up roof systems, where the roof system is on a hinge, and when it comes to the field, it's actually tilted up once on site, and it's completed on site, whereas a manufactured home, the roof systems are typically completed. Just again, from a cost reduction standpoint, the more you can do in the factory, the less on site, the lower that initial cost to the home buyer. And that is, for a long time been the real appeal of manufactured housing is the lower price point that results from 90% of the work being done in the factory, because that is less expensive to use assembly line workers in a factory setting as opposed to using site contractors. And so modular, just to answer your question, modular does need to meet the requirements. As an example, though, there are some modular manufacturers, I'll just say, that do deliver a turnkey box. Some have heard of Vermont, that we worked with since, not long after Tropical Storm Irene. They developed a product that could travel down the road, that had that insulated assembly, both at the floor that was needed. They also had the insulated roof assembly. So they delivered that 90% complete home that exceeded our state's residential building energy standards. So it is possible to do that, but it does come at an additional expense that, what we're finding can be upwards of twice the cost of what the manufactured housing industry can deliver. And that's a combination of a couple things. One, it's more expensive to build in a lower volume factory, of which most of our modular manufacturers are lower volume. They might move one module a day. Whereas, for example, our factory, and I shared some good data points earlier, that, they're in Sangerfield, New York, the Titan Homes factory is moving about 7 homes per day. So there's a big difference, in regards to volume and economies of scale, volume purchasing and economies of scale there. So.
Okay. Polly Major has a question too.
Yeah, thanks for all this information, Peter. And VHCB and VIC Efficiency Vermont work together a lot on manufactured housing, so I get to work with Peter quite a bit. And you had mentioned a little bit earlier when you were talking about the standards changing for especially the single wide, that it's not always that we're trying to meet a lower price point to get at affordability for lower income buyers, but that's not always taking into account the life cycle costs and the energy costs of the home. And I was hoping you could dig into that a little bit more as we kind of, as a statewide policy, look at balancing the need for more units and using dollars in a way that's going to create as many units as possible, while also looking at the long-term efficiency and affordability of those units.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really gets to where we are today, which I do feel we're getting to a place where we are finding a balance with regards to the energy efficiency, health, indoor air quality, comfort, durability that we can accomplish with a manufactured home. It may not be meeting our residential building energy standard. It may be slightly below sort of our bare minimum standards for modular stick-built panelized homes, but we are able to get a home that I feel we can deem is a healthy home, that is a durable home that's going to last, close to, if not as long as a stick-built home. Again, there's so much variability out there in all of these spaces. So, but also, the homes we just delivered to Bennington, Vermont, 7 homes with the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board and Shires Housing. Those homes are all electric. They rely on some of the best HVAC and hot water equipment that's made today, heat pump based. They have high insulation values throughout all assemblies, good high performance windows. We've done performance testing both at the factory and are going to be doing additional testing on site, but have met really high levels of duct tightness and air tightness. So these homes are far exceeding what we had seen historically in this space. So we are at, as I noted, this sort of transition period where I feel like we can get a home for that's going to serve our affordable home ownership or low income rental space well, and which can certainly be delivered at a lower price point, allowing for more units, to be delivered than if we were to use an alternative construction methodology, such as stick building these in the field, modular or panelized. And I will also say, the volume of homes we can deliver out of a plant that's, delivering 7 modules per day versus one that can only do 1 module per day, or, panelized or stick built, as we all know, that could be a home that takes 6-9 months a year to build. We can certainly begin to scale quicker in this industry. So what we've done is, we really leveraged this new Zero Energy Ready Home standard, the $5,000 tax credit. The industry has shown that they're very interested in meeting this standard and delivering this level of product to the customer. So we now have three factories that I'm aware of that we're working with that will now deliver these Zero Energy Ready homes, and actually they're all exceeding the baseline standard and meeting more of a target standard that we've defined.
Thank you, Peter. And I think as we look towards the section of our report that talks about the standards and energy efficiency in homes, it's a place that you can call out the opportunity of the Zero Energy Ready home and that junction of, thank you, that junction of efficiency and affordability that we're achieving with this new model.
Go ahead, Senator.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. Great questions, Polly. And great answers, Peter. Can you give us maybe a 1-sheet summary of the some assumptions of what someone would pay in energy costs on one of the homes meeting the lower standards versus what they would pay for energy costs versus under these higher standards, so that we could compare that, say, over a 20-year period with the cost of the home? And I think you did tell us the cost of these homes previously, but I don't remember. Can you tell us again?
Yeah, so, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch manufactured home delivered to a mobile home park lot that has, sufficient water, sewer, electrical. There's always some site upgrades that are needed as we're looking at sites that were developed decades ago. And so typically we're removing an existing abandoned home, maybe even an old slab. And so there's some site work, but using a couple of projects as examples, we can get folks into homes, at $150,000 or less. We're actually doing some farm worker housing, where we're doing 4 or 5 bedrooms, under $200,000, which is quite significant. If you were to compare that to delivering a modular or doing a stick-built home in that same application, so it's really apples to apples, we'd be close to twice the cost to deliver that same home. And when we think about, life cycle costs of that home, we do have good financing options right now. So let's just say with the USDA RD 502 loan, we could get folks into a typical mortgage term and a good interest rate that would be equivalent to what somebody might get for their stick-built home that they're building on private land. As we think about cash flow on a monthly basis, we can get really close with regards to energy costs. And certainly the mortgage is going to be that much less, assuming the same terms than that equivalent modular or stick-built home. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, obviously this is an ongoing conversation. That's really helpful. And then I am interested in knowing more about the 4 and 5 bedroom homes. I don't know if the rest of the group is interested in that right now, but I would like to know more about, are those models on the market? Is it something anybody can buy? Because I can see a lot of applications for something in that price range where you can house 4 to 5 people for $200,000. That's a
Right.
pretty good deal. It's better than what we're getting in other sectors.
Yes, yeah. So yes, so all the manufacturers, and that's one of the really great aspects, honestly, of the manufactured housing industry is, and if I speak specifically to the Titan Homes plant in Sangerfield, New York, as an example, they have a line of single section homes, and in this case, it's called the Ascend line. They have 12 single section homes that go, from a single bedroom all the way up to 3-bedroom, 2-bath. With all different levels of living space, so different sizes. They go all the way up to 74 feet long. And then they do the same with their 2-section homes. In this case, they only do single section or 2-section homes. Some manufacturers actually do 3-section homes as well. But they go all the way up to 5 bedrooms with their 2-section homes. And these are just stock designs that are certified. They have to be signed off by a third-party engineer and HUD to be approved to be built, which is another part of the HUD standard. And so you can get those turnkey. You can literally pick them out of the booklet. There's always a level of customization that's allowable as well. So if, we customized a couple of farm worker housing units that we did where we wanted a little bit larger mudroom, to kick boots off and hang some, clothing that we didn't want to migrate into the spaces of the bedrooms that we want to be left in an area. So we were able to modify those designs, increase the size of the laundry area, that kind of thing. So even though there are stock designs that you can pick from and that, there's really built-in pricing with our retailers around the state, there's also customization that's allowable as well. So yep, you can get anything from a very small 40-foot long home that's a single section, 13 feet wide, 1 bedroom, all the way up to, a 66-foot long 2-section home that's 5 bedrooms.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Gail.
Peter, do you know what the average cost of the site work is with the full slab?
So typically the slabs, again, it depends on about the house, but let's say the slab would be about $12,000. And to hook up all the utilities, assuming you have good water, sewer, electrical right there, you're talking another few $1,000s with regards to hooking into the existing infrastructure. And again, this is in our mobile home park or with mobile home replacement on private land where everything's already in place. We're looking at, what we're doing in Bennington is we're doing a frost protected system that doesn't require a concrete slab. That's called a base wall system, which can reduce that pricing further. As nothing's really happening under the home other than wanting to have a stable foundation that's not going to be susceptible to frost and moving. And so we're looking to reduce those costs as much as we can. If you get onto private land and you're just putting in a new home, obviously those costs can be much higher. Again, same, approximately $12,000 for the slab, but water, sewer, electrical, those could go from just, a few $1,000s to tie into existing to, $35,000, $40,000 if you have to bring in new services that don't exist.
Thank you.
Yep. And I'll just note, in our mobile home parks, often we're seeing that we need to upgrade, or I think we'll see this more as we get into some of our older parks where the electrical service wasn't sized for all electric homes and our newer homes that, have more electrical loads. And so upgrading the electrical service, it's not a huge financial burden, but we are seeing that. And as we think about the electrification of our vehicles on top of that, and people maybe wanting home chargers, we're going from, 60 amp service that is existing in some parks that's really insufficient for any new home, to going to 100 amp for an all electric home to 200 amp, for an all electric home where you're thinking about the potential for future EV charging, or if somebody wants a hot tub, electrical loads that go beyond your typical residence.
Okay. I have one more question. Anybody? Can you just speak a little bit about regarding durability of the mobile homes that are now being brought into Vermont as a comparison to, say, the stick-built or modular? Are they, you did say that they're holding up better, or they seem to, they're better built, and then the foundation, the fact that they have to have skirting and the foundation increases the durability. Are they becoming really comparable to standard housing?
Yeah, I feel that the homes that we're now delivering, particularly under the Zero Energy Ready Home Standard, and I can't understate the measures that are required as part of that program that really significantly increase what I believe to be the durability and longevity of these homes. So part of the reason that we're standing behind that standard and promoting it. And you don't see those same standards, in even the new HUD manufactured housing code, nor in the Energy Star version 3, certainly for the single section homes. So yes, I would say we're getting to a point where we're going to see homes that are going to have the same durability, longevity as we would see with stick-built and modular homes. We're continuing to work with, we work with all of our builders across all these different housing sectors, every day to help them improve these measures. Building science products advance every day as well. So there's, I think you'd be hard pressed to find folks that work in my line of work and builders and architects and engineers that are doing the same thing they did a year ago, let alone 5 years ago. It's quite remarkable how quickly this industry changes and our specifications and design changes. So all I can say is we're focusing on this space to continue improving manufactured homes so they do align with what we're seeing as best practices in those other sectors, stick-built, modular, panelization. And, I am hopeful based on the ZERH standard and the involvement that we're having with our factories now, which we hadn't had historically, that and also our retailers that we're working with, such as Fecto Homes, which is right outside the state capitol there, that we've worked with on and are working with on some projects right now. So, yeah, I do feel good about, us seeing a more equivalent product moving forward, as we work more collaboratively as opposed to just getting homes delivered, to our state, to our retailers without really, specifications and oversight.
Good. Any more questions then? So that's very informative. I appreciate you coming by, dropping in.
And I'll just reference that I shared the slides from the first time I visited with the group. Again, I know a question came up with regards to sort of like annual energy costs comparing across the standards. That slide is in there. And we are working hard to, as I noted, sort of reduce the reliance on fossil fuels, unregulated fossil fuels, have all electric homes, and then also get homes that have roof systems that are solar ready. And that's what we're doing in Bennington. So just want to note as a final note that, we are getting to a point where we should be able to get really close to almost eliminating sort of that annual energy burden when we think about an all electric house with solar PV on the roof, which is what we've been doing with the Zero Energy Modular product and program. And we're moving in the right direction with the Zero Energy manufactured home now.
Okay. Very good. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to take a break for about 10 minutes. So everybody come back at 25 past, and then we'll hopefully hear from VTrans. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks again. Yeah, take care, everyone.
Yep. Okay, looks like I was able to unmute us. That's because I have my fancy pen. Okay, we're back from our break, and Kyle Oberauer from VTrans is going to speak with us about the various reports and the project that they're working on. Do you need to be able to share your screen?
I don't think so. I mean, as long as everyone's had a chance to at least, look at the documents, I'm assuming you've all been able to sort of share those reports. I don't anticipate needing control or anything.
Okay, they have been available. They're on the reports and resources page of our website under, you can find Department of Transportation or something like that.
Okay.
There's 2 reports there.
Yeah.
And so if people want to bring them up, they can. They are lengthy reports, but they're interesting. So go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to speak about some of our VTrans recent work on mobile properties. And the documents are lengthy, and they do go into the weeds a little bit. So after this meeting, if there are questions or if anyone wants to talk more, I'm happy to do that. But I basically plan to give just a quick overview of the work to date, and then maybe after 10 minutes or so, happy to answer questions and talk more about the work. I'm an architectural historian within the environmental group at VTrans, and within the environmental group, we have architectural historians, archaeologists, biologists, and as a group, we basically are tasked with avoiding and minimizing impacts to different types of resources within Vermont that could potentially be affected by transportation projects. So in my case, I'm primarily looking at above ground cultural resources. And typically those are properties that are either eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places or listed. And this work is related to transportation funding. So depending on the funding source, there are different state and federal laws that basically require VTrans or a lead federal agency like the Federal Highway Administration to consider these transportation-related impacts to, in my case, cultural resources. And there is basically standardized national criteria that the National Park Service maintains that helps guide those determinations on whether or not something is historically significant. And for Vermont, if we have a state-funded transportation project, Vermont's Historic Preservation Act essentially follows those federal guidelines. So the state and federal guidelines for basically what's historically significant basically mirror each other. And the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation really is sort of the final say on what is and what is not historically significant in Vermont. But under various agreements with the Division for Historic Preservation and the Federal Highway Administration and other transportation partners, a lot of those regulatory responsibilities are delegated to VTrans. So to me, and that's sort of why we have our in-house staff doing a lot of this work. And whether it's a state or federally funded project, a starting point when you're thinking about whether or not something's historically significant is how old is it? And 50 years of age or older is sort of where we start. And driving around Vermont, driving through our downtowns, you can really get a sense of whether or not a house is more than 50 years old. But recently, there are manufactured home parks that have become 50 years old. And as we are, as an agency, reviewing transportation projects, delivering transportation projects, we basically don't have a good sense of what we have in Vermont for mobile homes, mobile home parks. And so if we have a project that's state or federally funded that could potentially affect a mobile home, whether it's an individual property or an entire community, an entire park, each time we're basically starting from scratch. And it's time consuming, it can be expensive, and to really, as a best practice, we need to have, as a state, as an agency, we really need to have a good comprehensive idea of what we have in Vermont for mobile properties and could any of them be historically significant. And so that's really where the 2021 reconnaissance survey started by Mead and Hunt. And we basically tasked Mead and Hunt with basically, doing that comprehensive statewide survey to tell us what they could find. And at the end of their report, make a recommendation as to whether or not there are mobile properties in Vermont that could be historically significant. And their recommendation was yes, there are enough property types, and it looks like there could potentially be some historically significant parks. And so basically our next step is to develop a multiple property documentation form for mobile properties in Vermont. And that will ultimately streamline the project review work that we do at VTrans, because we will be able to cite that document. We'll have a clear understanding of what exists statewide for mobile properties, but it also really, through developing a historic context through this document, it really has some good information, Vermont-specific information on the evolution of mobile homes in Vermont and parks. And so, one of the other goals, hopefully, is that other state agencies, committees will be able to use this data for other purposes too. But really, this document is designed to be a transportation planning tool to streamline our project reviews, but also to just better inform us as an agency and in partnership with the Division for Historic Preservation, really to make good decisions on whether or not we're calling mobile homes, mobile parks historically significant. And as part of this work, the state architectural historian at the Division for Historic Preservation and myself, we went back and forth on sort of semantics. And typically, for the purposes of this project, we decided that rather than, I've been using the word mobile properties, but we decided that's sort of a misnomer. I mean, these properties, yes, were brought to these sites at one point, and they could technically be moved oftentimes, but we decided rather than calling them mobile properties to call them manufactured homes or manufactured home parks, which more closely aligns with various state and federal guidance. So for our purposes, we've been calling them manufactured homes rather than mobile properties. But there's a lot more to it, but from VTrans perspective, that's sort of where we're coming from with this work. And basically the next steps are this federal fiscal year, utilizing roughly, I think, 80% federal funds, 20% state funding. We are going to hopefully finalize this project. And the big challenge for this final phase of the initiative is actually finding a manufactured home or a manufactured home park that meets this eligibility criteria to be formally listed in the National Register. And that's really, especially with the flooding we had this summer, that's going to be somewhat of a challenge. And the other challenge too is that property owners have to agree to this listing. So there can be, whether it's a manufactured home or other property types, there can be some reluctance from property owners in listing their properties officially in the National Register. So there are a couple of challenges moving forward in finalizing the project, but to officially list this multiple property documentation form with the National Park Service, we need to find a Vermont-specific example that meets this eligibility criteria we're developing, and basically, yeah, to formally list everything, we need to find a good Vermont example. So that's the task of this federal fiscal year. I'm optimistic, but we don't have anything in mind yet. So we have to do some looking around and knock on some doors and find a good candidate or two. But that's my quick overview. So I'm happy to answer questions or talk more if there's anything specific about the work we've done to this point that I can elaborate on or clarify. I'm happy to do that.
Good, thanks. So does that mean you only need to find one manufactured home in the state of Vermont that fits the criteria for the list?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, our goal is to find a manufactured home park to list, so it's not just a single property. I think the threshold to list an individual manufactured home is very high. It's much easier to list a park because there are multiple manufactured homes, and there are often other associated features like maybe some communal spaces, a pool. There could be some sort of planned community aspect. So maybe there was an overall design for this manufactured park. It's not just an individual manufactured home that would maybe to list an individual home. Really, the manufactured home would have to be significant for its design, so its architecture. But if we're talking about a manufactured home community, like I said, there are lots of other things that can collectively contribute to that historic significance. So design, communal spaces, lot layout, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more to sort of hang our hats on if we're talking about a collection of manufactured homes as opposed to an individual property.
Okay, Sean, you go ahead. You're on, you got.
Sorry. Hi, thank you very much. Hi, Kyle. We haven't met. I'm Sean Gilpin at the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Sure, hi, Sean.
In the housing division, not the
Okay.
Historic Preservation division, which is
Okay.
also in our department.
Sure.
And I will perhaps embarrassingly admit that it only came to our attention at the housing division a couple of days ago that this report was in the works.
Sure.
Despite the fact that I know you've worked with, or I've come to understand you've worked with Devin Coleman, perhaps, and maybe some other folks in historic preservation. That said, and forgive me, I was actually trying to see if Laura Treishman could hop on, the state historic preservation officer.
Yeah.
Looks like she's actually out today. But with all of that, I'm actually curious, and forgive me if you already covered this and I was distracted trying to get Laura in here, but what sort of the end, and this sort of, I think Representative Taylor was mentioning this, what sort of the end benefit to a community of being listed? Why would a mobile home community be interested in being listed? Because I do understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not an automatic situation. It's something that a property owner needs to seek out, and it wouldn't necessarily be if you found. And forgive me if I'm imputing something that the chair was not trying to imply, but it's not as though if you find one community home or whatnot and list it, that then others would automatically be listed. It's a piece by piece addition to the registry, which is so I guess, is that an accurate description? And then what would be the benefit of being on the registry?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, I think I think that is accurate. So it's if one property or one park was listed in the National Register formally, that wouldn't mean anything else would be officially listed. It'd really have to be a case-by-case basis. So the listing of an individual park, for example, basically formalizes and sort of legitimizes, I guess, this multiple property documentation form. As is, the multiple property documentation form is still a useful document to VTrans. For us, for our transportation planning, it still really helps us with our project reviews, it streamlines things, and it's useful as is. And like I said, officially listing this multiple property documentation form really just, like I said, it legitimizes. It's the National Park Service saying, yes, we agree, this looks great, and really formalizes everything. But the benefits of being listed really sort of go beyond VTrans scope. That'd be more of a Division 4 Historic Preservation topic that they really would be the experts on. But there are benefits if we're talking about something like a communal space at a manufactured home park. There might be opportunities for funding if there is something that's formally listed or even eligible. I would imagine, again, I'm getting sort of outside of my lane a little bit. Laura would know better than me, but I would imagine one of the biggest benefits would be funding opportunities through grants of after your community maybe was formally listed. So for VTrans, the work that we're doing, our ultimate goal for the project, whether a property is formally listed or not, doesn't change much because under the legislation we work under, properties are treated the same whether they're eligible or formally listed. So for us as an agency, it wouldn't change much, but again, the Division 4 Historic Preservation might have more information on the benefits of being listed, but one of my main guesses is funding opportunities, and there are lots of other things that maybe go along with being formally listed in the National Register. Like some people get excited about it. It gives people a sense of pride, and I think a lot of times if we tell people, hey, your manufactured home community is historically significant, it could be listed in the National Register. I mean, I think that's something that is surprising to a lot of people. So it's kind of a fun recognition too. To it's one of those historic resources we typically don't think about that often. So
Sure. Thanks for that, Kyle. And Gail, forgive me. I do, if it pleases everyone, I think I can share a link to Devin Coleman, who's the state architectural historian in our office, that might be able to speak to the registry. So if it pleases the committee or the task force to have him join.
Wendy, did you have some input there? No.
No, I think that would be great. Is that the question?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't want to get in the way.
Yeah, why don't you share the link and bring them into the waiting room, or bring them on board, and we can, in the meantime, we'll hear from Gail.
Please, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Kyle. Kyle, you said that the property owner might be reluctant to be put on the registry. What would be the disadvantage for the property owner?
Sure. And yeah, if Devin hops on, he can definitely speak more to this also. But I think historically there's some misconceptions about being listed, having a property listed on the National Register, and some of those misconceptions revolve around property owners maybe being under the impression that if their property is listed in the National Register, they will not be able to do maybe what they want to do with the property in the future. They might have restrictions on how they could renovate their property, materials they might be able to use, renovating their property, everything from, those restrictions to potential, tax implications. And really at the end of the day, though, they're all misconceptions. They're not true. But if there were those types of restrictions, they would really, I think, again, I'm getting a little outside of my lane here, but those restrictions would come more from the local level, not necessarily from being listed in the National Register. Those would maybe be local zoning requirements that would place some of those restrictions on historic properties. But just being listed in the National Register would not restrict property owners from doing what they want to do, unless maybe they were applying for some sort of federal grant or like a historic preservation, rehabilitation, tax credits. Those kind of things do have specific requirements, but again, that's only if you are interested in taking advantage of some of those grant opportunities. And some of those grants do have strings attached, but just being listed by itself typically will not burden the property owner any differently or change how they can use their property.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we do have Devin Coleman here. Sean, you want to ask the questions that we had to bring him in?
I gave Devin a little bit in the
okay.
magic of Teams and multiple monitors, a little background, but I'll let him introduce himself. And then, Devin, we're just in the realm of mobile home parks, and recently brought up this historic assessment that's going on, and what that might mean. So,
great.
I'll let you jump in. Introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me. Glad this worked out.
Yeah.
So I'm Devin Coleman. I'm the state architectural historian at the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation. And one of my roles is to oversee and facilitate the National Register of Historic Places program for properties in Vermont. So I serve as the intermediary between the applicant who wants to list a property and the National Park Service, which oversees the National Register program and has final say on what gets listed. So that's my role in the process. And I'm not sure how much background Kyle gave you all, but basically we've been working on this with VTrans. I think, largely because mobile home parks are such an important part of our housing stock, and they have been really completely overlooked in our historic assessments of properties throughout the state. We don't only look at the big fancy pretty houses. We look at multifamily housing, we look at workers housing, we look at neighborhoods, different types of housing stock, and mobile home parks are certainly a very clearly identifiable housing type and method of creating housing opportunities and creating neighborhoods. So that was really the genesis of the project was just to start thinking about, what's the realm of what's out there in terms of mobile home parks. What's their developmental history? Why do we have them? Why do they get built where they're built? And I think one of the really interesting outcomes of the initial study was the direct correlation between construction of the interstate and location of new mobile home parks. Just hand in glove, that follow it right up the state. So that's a really interesting developmental pattern that helps explain why these resources are where they are. So at this point, what we're working on is basically an overarching document that is informational. So it's just telling us, what are these resources? What's out there? How can it be categorized and analyzed? And then we can use that information in times of disaster, flooding. Oftentimes there's a scramble to figure out, okay, what was impacted, what was on the ground in this area that we might need to think about in terms of how it's treated, and having an umbrella document like this that tells us exactly where the parks are, when they were built, how many properties they have, some historical information. Then we can quickly start to sort through and figure out, okay, this is what we're dealing with. This is the realm of, the context within which this park exists. And then share that information and figure out next steps in terms of recovery, rebuilding, and so on.
Okay. Kyle, your hand's up, I think. Do you have a question or comment?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to, for Devin's benefit, I just wanted to also mention that when I was giving an overview sort of the project, Devin, one of the questions that came up was benefits to, I mentioned that sort of this next phase of the project, ultimately, if we can, would be to formally list the multiple property documentation form. And with your help, and one of the questions that came up was, what are some of the benefits of formal listing? And
Right.
That's something you can talk to more than me. So
right, yeah. So, and I want to be clear that what we're doing right now is not any sort of formal designation or listing of any type. The multiple property documentation form is a cover document that gives all the background history and context, but it is not a nomination per se. So nothing's being formally listed. That's a separate process. And through that process, there is property owner notification and involvement. So there's opportunity for input from all the stakeholders if and when we get to the point of doing a formal National Register nomination. So right now we're working on the multiple property form, which is the umbrella cover document with all the historical information for us to refer to. If a park does want to be formally listed, first and foremost, it's an honorific designation. So it's not it's neither a means of opening access to great pots of money, unfortunately, nor is it a means of putting in place strict regulatory restrictions. It's really an honorific. It's about pride of place and understanding what makes that place special. That said, there are federal tax credits that could be made available to mobile home park property owners. And this is something that we're still working through with the National Park Service. They've never listed a mobile home park anywhere. So this is new territory nationally. And one of the questions is, mobile home parks, a lot of them are unique in that you have a property owner that owns the land and a housing owner who owns the unit. The listing is for the property. And so there's a question of, okay, where do the unit owners fit into this? Could the property owner get a federal tax credit to do rehabilitation work on individual units that they don't actually own? We're not sure. So this is still to be determined, but potentially if there's a park where both the housing units and the land are owned by the same entity, then that's a different scenario. They could potentially apply for tax credits to do rehabilitation work on the units themselves. The other benefit comes in times of disaster, flooding. FEMA will look at historic status of properties as one factor when they're evaluating repair options. And there are some avenues for repair and mitigation that are more flexible when you're dealing with a historic property. So it opens up some options for alternative solutions for floodproofing, mitigation, repairs, reconstruction, post-disaster. So those are typically the biggest benefits, financial benefits that come out of the National Register listing. And as Kyle referenced, contrary to popular belief, it does not restrict in any way the owner's use, maintenance, or disposition of the property. So hypothetically, I could list my great house in the National Register and tear it down tomorrow. It doesn't restrict what I can do with my private property. So.
Okay. Good. Questions then? Okay. I think
I guess just a couple of just observations. It's interesting that we have this study on the history of mobile home parks. I was just looking through it and just about different things that happened in World War II, and it's good to have. And so VTrans put this together to just be aware of these locations when they're looking at new roadways, I guess, right? Because it's part of the environmental process or
essentially, yeah. We VTrans has our Vermont Federal Highway Division is a great partner, and they have funding opportunities every year. Their HDWP work programs, and I can never remember what that stands for, but essentially it's funding available to VTrans for planning, transportation planning, whether it's trying to streamline something, improve a process, deliver our projects better. And that was the funding source for the work so far. And VTrans, because many of these manufactured homes and parks are now 50 years of age or more, when we have a transportation project that could potentially affect a manufactured home or a park, we have to consider whether or not that property could be historically significant. Could it be eligible for the National Register? And currently, if a project could potentially affect one of those property types, we have to approach them on a case-by-case basis. And so working with the Division for Historic Preservation, we started talking about creating a comprehensive statewide document that would help us in our transportation planning, our transportation delivery. It would streamline our project reviews in the environmental section, but also give us an idea of that Vermont-specific evolution of manufactured homes, and really develop a Vermont-specific historic context for these property types that could also hopefully be beneficial to other state agencies and basically anyone else who could use the data. So it helps VTrans in our project delivery, but also it's a comprehensive study that I think others could also benefit from.
Yeah.
But
it is really interesting, and I would suggest that when you're finished, you might want to send a copy to the towns who are mentioned, because
sure.
Just zipping through this, I saw something about the DeWitt Trailer Park, and those are the DeWitts who the most recent housing project that happened in Brattleboro is the DeWitt building. So it's interesting when those connections happen.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then just a little benefit that could be I would think this would make them more eligible for historic markers, and people do like historic markers, so that could be something that the parks would appreciate, and at least the parks who are listed, even if they're not on the register, but just if they're eligible, they would get extra attention from VTrans when there is a project going in. So I think that's a good thing. There won't be a road or
right
some sort of something that would diminish their quality of life, I would argue.
Yeah.
They have more likelihood of getting advanced knowledge and being heard in the process.
Absolutely, yeah. And another I think sort of catalyst for this work too is that there are, as an agency, VTrans, we have a relatively new transportation equity framework, and nationally there's the Department of Transportation has an equity action plan. So looking at these property types, oftentimes there could be environmental justice communities that in the past maybe were disproportionately affected by transportation projects. And so thinking about equity and environmental justice moving forward, having this information is also very useful in considering those communities that maybe have been overlooked in the past when we start talking about impacts and disaster response and that kind of those kind of considerations. So
good. And then just one other thing I want to mention is just transit access, because having access to transit obviously makes your costs of living in general less. So it's really important that mobile home parks do have access to transit. I know a lot of them do, or I think a lot of them do. And I thought this conversation might be on that, but I totally understand that it's not, and that's fine. But this data, especially the data on where they are, could help inform a conversation about transit and mobile home parks.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that'd be great. I'd say, yeah, the more people, the more applicable this information, this work, the better. So yeah, we're happy to share it with everyone, anyone who could use it. Happy to share. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Kyle and Devin, for coming in and dropping into our little group for a while and getting that explained. And the documents are, as I said, on the website to anybody to look at.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay.
Thanks so much, Devin, for hopping in,
no
and thanks,
problem.
Kyle, for sharing the time.
Sure. All right.
See you later.
Bye.
Okay, we're running a little bit behind, but we do have some flexibility in the rest of the meeting. I've asked, and Senator kind of started this, was to get some recommendations from each of you, what their top three, after learning all that you've learned or seeing all that you've seen, what sorts of recommendations would you make? I'm trying to really begin to flesh out, focus the design of the report coming up. So, if you opened up the report, the idea is that the executive summary would hit the high spots. A lot of people will not go beyond the executive summary. For a lot of people, the executive summary will spark some interest, and they'll look at the more detailed what's going on later. So it's important to really make that our focus for what we think is. So I've asked some of you or all of you to come up with 2 or 3 recommendations. I'd like to go over any of those we can now so we can discuss them and see whether they should be in the executive summary, what should be said about them. And then I have some thoughts also on the report as well. So anybody want to volunteer to be first with their recommendations? I don't see a lot of yellow hands going up.
I'll actually go ahead and break the ice a little bit, in part because I don't have a lot in terms of my top priorities. I spoke with the Ledge Council yesterday. John, it was great to have a one-on-one with you. I just wanted to mention to the group that I think, from my perspective as part of the Agency of Commerce, I definitely personally have some things that I think are really important. In order for me to actually put an ACCD stamp on recommendations, it's going to have to go through a lot more. So acknowledging that, I really appreciate the work of this group. I think a lot of things have come to fore that are really helpful. I will say that to the extent that I can sort of put forward some priorities from the agency's perspective, I think I will submit two. One being sort of the still somewhat amorphous idea of a technical assistance provider for some of the small parks that would be interested in turning co-op, and the idea being having some sort of organization in state. As much as we love the help of the Community Development Institute, CDI that's come in and spoken, I think it would be helpful to have an in-state practitioner who could do sort of the kind of the fixed costs of running a cooperative, your financials, your a regular sort of legal opinions you need every once in a while and things like that. Have that in a centralized place so that some of these smaller parks would actually be more viable as cooperatives, because they could outsource or purchase some of that expertise. So a technical service provider, whether that's creating a new organization or whether it's bolstering one of the many that we have in the state, I think is an open conversation about how best to go about that. So technical service provision would be one. And actually, I'll go ahead and say three, I guess. So you'll get what you were asking for. Working to figure out some of the regulatory streamlining that we can do, especially when it comes to water and wastewater hookups. I think is something that the administration has definitely been pushing for a while. And I think the final recommendation, and I am totally losing my train of thought. I had quite a head of steam there, didn't I? Let's come back to that. So I'll let somebody else speak.
So, all right, I was excited about the third one. I was wondering what
a cliffhanger. Wow. Guys. It's I would say it's Friday, but it's not. It's only Tuesday, so I have no excuse.
Can you be a little more specific on the regulatory things with the hookups? I'm just not. It's an issue I'm not familiar with.
I think specifically, and this is not unique to mobile home parks, but especially dealing with when it comes to some double permitting when it comes to water and wastewater issues, especially for municipalities that have a permitting regime that is substantially similar to what the state requires. There are instances where in order to hook up to the sewer pipe, you have to have an engineer that the municipality is okay with and get their permit, and then you have to have a separate report that the state is okay with, and that's I'm happy to elaborate outside of this brief moment, because I know that we're on time, and I'm sure Mary actually is raising her hand, and I suspect that Tri-Park has dealt with this before, so you might be more eloquent than I.
Yep. Go ahead, Mary. We'll go to your recommendations. Make that add that to your comment.
And maybe Sean's third recommendation was continued and potentially increased funding for infrastructure repairs. If not, that's certainly one of mine. And also simplifying that process. And Liz Curry in the other mobile home group has had a lot to say about simplifying the process of getting at that money. She's dealt with it. It drives her crazy. Tri-Park has been fortunate in having a development professional working for us, so I actually can't be eloquent about how problematic it is.
Okay. You want to cover your other recommendations? They were? Mary?
No, my other one was something that was already taken care of. In
I see. Yeah, you're right. Those two are, you covered everything. Okay. Gail, you
Yep.
Go ahead, Gail.
I'd like to emphasize that my perspective and point of view is primarily as an individual that lives in a mobile home community and also receives input from other mobile home communities residents or board members that own their home lease their lot. So with charge 1, I'd like to propose to consider the formation of a standing group or committee that continue the work the task force has outlined, maintaining engagement of individuals within existing mobile home communities, as well as planners and community experts interested in the creation of new mobile home communities. That's 1. And charge 3, the impact of taxes. In Colchester for 2023, 2024, there's future priorities noted to review the need to reassess mobile home parks to comply with state statutes and town equity, reassess parks if required. Work has begun in legal counsel and Vermont Department of Taxes to determine if members on the mobile home communities in Colchester and possibly Williston and Shelburne are paying their fair share of property tax. Perhaps it would be possible for someone from the assessor's office to present what they have mapped out for this exploration and how it could help with the work that we've begun here. What are the personal property versus real estate implications to the homeowner? And yes, for 3.
Yeah. Gail, can I ask a question just so I understand? I don't know if everybody else understands. So what were you reading from something that said that some agency or group is concerned that mobile homes are not paying their fair share?
They're going to do a reassessment to see if mobile homes are paying their fair share.
Is there concern that mobile homes are not paying enough or that they may be paying too much?
It didn't say, and I had one of the board members speak to the tax assessor, and he just laid out that there was 2 communities that went co-op in the last year and a half, 2 years, and that triggered the possibility of doing a reassessment. Westbury became a co-op in 2019, and then 2 others became co-op within the last year and a half, 2 years. And that's what triggered the idea of whether they need to do a reassessment.
Okay, so I would guess they're saying that the communities are not paying enough now.
I would
Usually you don't do those assessments when you want to reduce somebody's taxes.
Safe to say.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay.
And then charge 4, I propose to review the standards that apply to sales of used mobile homes currently. It's my understanding that the dealer is permitted to sell a used home with the standards that apply to that home for the year it was constructed, which may not meet the HUD regulatory and specification codes of the year it's purchased. Although used homes may be more affordable solely based on the sale price, are there ways to encourage energy efficiency by either retrofitting an older manufactured home or helping a family afford a home that is better energy efficiency built in?
I see. Yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't thought of that.
I just also want to add one thing. When I asked that question to Peter about what's the typical cost of doing what is that called again when you do the field work, when you're putting in a new
set up of the site? Yeah,
site work. That's not been our experience here. It's been between 25 and 30,000, 35,000 with the slab.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Polly, how about you?
Okay.
Is that Sandrine who just popped on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to jump in, but
Okay,
John just cut me off, so it's okay. You
I'll let you two
go
fight it out if you want.
I didn't put my hand up, that's why, and I
Oh.
apologize. But the reason why I wanted to jump in is because Sean, Mary, and Gail have touched upon the three priorities that I sent out. The technical providing, the technical provider, technical assistance provider. Of course, I've been advocating for years that CVOE be that entity, and I'm very somewhat shocked that Sean didn't even name this. They are the one actually funding us for this for years. But CVOE as a technical assistance provider is one of our priorities. We have been, like I said, pushed on that. The investment is right to do. We have the expertise, we have the relationships, and we do have the will. So for us, it's just common to say that we would be bidding for this if it comes to that. The second is, of course, continuing the assistance for mobile home repairs and infrastructure. That's again a no-brainer. And then the third piece that actually Gail touched upon, and Mary, I think, as well as Sean, is the creation of new mobile home parks and the financial assistance that needs to be attached to it. But Gail has been on point because one of the work that we have been doing at CVOE, and it's a project funded by the Vermont Community Foundation, is to create that group, Gail, to create that mobile home centered leadership group to be able to support that work and moving forward with that really action-based and strategic planning towards that, the work that and the goal that we want to achieve. So this is ongoing, and this is definitely something that I will add on top of on my third recommendation, I do believe.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Sandrine, I didn't call you out just because I was afraid that you might get the touch of death of somebody from the administration saying that you guys would be the best. So
No, I totally understand. Thank you, Sean. I know you trust us. I know that.
Sean has some limitations because he's a member of the administration, so he can't fight with the governor and things for what should be recommended.
That's true.
Go ahead, Paul.
So I think we're hearing a lot of themes and trends, which is great for a concise executive summary. So I'm going to echo some things that we've already heard. I think the first recommendation is around infrastructure. It's how we improve the infrastructure in existing parks, both through aligning the programs that help address problems in infrastructure. And I think that work is starting to happen. There's a working group between ANR, VHCB, USDA that looks at aligning program requirements and increasing efficiency, but there's more work to be done. I think helping parks access that funding, technical assistance is a huge part of that. So whether that be CVOE or a lot of Liz Curry's or a combination, we need to think about how to really bolster the technical assistance in the state to help those resources reach the parks that need it most. And still in the infrastructure vein, we need a mechanism to help adequately assess the infrastructure needs of parks at time of sale. And that's often there's so much time pressure at time of sale that and the full engineering assessment is costly and time consuming, that it's hard to do that and really know for the co-op or nonprofit taking on the park what those underlying infrastructure needs are and how to wrap that into financing and how to access the financing. So anything we can do to help crack that infrastructure assessment nut would be helpful as well. I think the second priority is that we prioritize meeting the needs of our existing parks and communities. There are just we've been talking through the needs that are out there in terms of infrastructure, in terms of improving the quality of homes, in terms of taking advantage of the advancements that have been made in manufactured home construction. And there's a lot of work that can be done and is starting to be done, but needs to be done to ensure the sustainability of these communities and the quality of life within these communities. So I'm excited about the focus that this group has had in that area. And then as we look at the creation of new parks, really wanting to make sure we have guardrails in place when doing that address some of the structural issues that have led to the issues we're trying to fix in the existing parks. So these two are very linked. So we don't want to find ourselves 30 years down the road with homes that have not been able to keep up an investment in quality because people are unable to access the mortgage market and get into a higher quality home, or infrastructure that has been underbuilt or underinvested in over the years. So how, especially if we're thinking of new parks as affordable communities, how are we getting a clear picture of the infrastructure costs, both to put it in new and then to have that capital reinvestment fund that's going to need to come out of grants, and how do we structure that so this can be an affordable community, and then to tie that affordability, if it is using public dollars, to a kind of long-term outcome.
Good. Yes. Yep.
I'm sorry, I wanted to add, CDI, I was contacting with CDI last week, I do believe. There is a study about the feasibility of creation of new mobile home parks in New England that is being done by Rock USA. So I think that when it comes to feasibility of, having new community being formed, we have some work that is being done, maybe to have the recommendation to have not a similar, but if it's not detailed enough that it applies to Little Vermont, to have one being done specifically for our state would be, I think, a first step forward.
Kurt, can I ask a couple questions? Sandrine, when is that study coming out?
I'm sorry. I don't know exactly when it is coming out, but I know that they are in the middle of actually completing the study. I have to be interviewed for it anyway.
Will you get it when it comes out, or Sean? I mean, are people here going to automatically get it?
We will get it. I'm sure that we will get it.
Okay, so please share it when you get it.
I can check with Jeremiah about it and follow up.
They're pretty good at sharing information. Rock USA, we have been working with them. So
yeah.
The hope is that they will share it with us, since we'll be part of the creation of that document by getting information from us. So.
And Cedric, do you know if they're looking, I'm assuming because it's Rock, they're looking specifically at the creation of a co-op, a new cooperative park, or if they're just looking at the hard infrastructure costs? Because I can see the kind of long-term ownership model playing a role in the long-term affordability and quality of the park. If it's a private investment that's looking for a quick turnaround on profit, that has an impact on reinvestment down the line in infrastructure, rather than a cooperative ownership structure where you have that incentive to keep on investing in your underlying infrastructure.
Well, the information I get is that they got money to do a feasibility study to investigate the barriers and opportunity of developing a new resident-owned manufactured housing community in New England. I do believe that it talks about cost, what is who will be involved, what is involved. Talks about what it means, the financing of it and all. So I do believe that they're going to touch upon many points, maybe not all. That's why I'm saying that if it does not provide the information that we need, we might need to have a more detailed focus on Vermont done. But at least there is some entity doing some study on the possibility of having more. even if it's regional, not necessarily focused locally.
Wendy, do you have a couple, or do you want, or?
No, I really wanted to hear from the folks who are involved in this first.
Okay.
Definitely. No, I really appreciate the thought that went into these recommendations. Just I want to get somewhere just a mention of transit in there, because that should be considered, and like existing transit facilities or services at mobile home parks should be continued. The Tri-Park people make use the mover a lot, and I just want the transit agencies to know that if we all agree that that is a priority, that it be a priority, and that the service be improved, not eliminated. Not that I know of anything that is intending to be eliminated. And then I just have one more thing before we go, but let's hear what Sean has to say.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was getting in the queue, so please go ahead.
Just on a different topic, I want to go see the Bennington site, and I may tag along with one of with a Tri-Park visit next. I think it's next week. If I do that, I can just let everybody else know that I'm going to go in case anybody else wants to go.
Sure, that'd be good.
I really want to see those, see that neighborhood.
The Shire House.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Sean.
Excuse me. Thank you for letting me tag in on the back end here. But also wanted to acknowledge that John and I had spoken about a potential fix, if you will, for the park, except for the distinction of park in Williston, that could get should be acknowledged as what they are. So I think we might be able to work around that. I would definitely be in support of what John and I spoke about yesterday. In terms of changing that definition so that Williston Park can actually be acknowledged as a park. The other thing, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I know I'm a fast talker, so I tend to steamroll other. And at risk of doing a little bit of log rolling here, I know we haven't had a lot of time to talk about it, but Sandrine sort of mentioned it in tangentially as far as mobile home repair. I know that I spoke about this very early on in this process, but our agency is continuing, our department is continuing to run the Manufactured Housing Improvement and Repair Program, affectionately known as MUR. It's not gold, it's not frankincense, it's MUR. So that program has been, I hate to say wildly popular, because that it implies that it's a super positive thing, but it's been widely popular because people are really hurting and desperately need repairs on their homes, and we've been able to do an incredible amount of work in a short amount of time. And as much as I am usually sent to these type of meetings to not ask for any money, but just articulate the work that's being done, because I as was alluded to, have some limitations to what we can sign our name as far as recommendations when it comes to allocations. But I would implore everybody, and I'm happy to throw a link into the chat or share it with folks online. But the MHIR, Manufactured Housing Improvement and Repair Program, has, and I'll defer to Sandrine to sing praises if she so desires, but it's been helping a lot of people, a lot of people. And it's a program that I personally feel like is long overdue, and should really be considered for permanency, because we've got a whole lot of folks. I'm seeing Mary, Gail, both nodding. A whole lot of folks who just need a relatively small investment to just make sure that they avoid homelessness. And where we've helped, I think, over 516 people in the last calendar year make sure that they're not falling into our general assistance program. So would love to see any support that this group decides is relevant and important as a recommendation. Just want to put that out there.
And not
Yeah.
that you have, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying I agree. Thanks for bringing it up. And we should on the committee page so that it stays forever, as opposed to just sending it to each other.
Yes, and this because of the flooding, the June flooding, I think that this has to be in connection with the current flooding recovery and prevention. That is a total disaster that actually makes it even more important to have some funding just in case it happens again. But repairs, we don't have enough money actually on a year to help everybody, but at least constantly replenishing the fund. It's the right thing to do. So yes, I concur with Sean 100%.
Good. We're getting close to the end of the meeting. There's one thing I wanted, and I have one point I want to add myself, but I know some of you might have time limitations. So before anybody leaves, I want to make sure we get the December 15th meeting time, which I don't believe we established. I believe we have the date, but not the time. So let's quickly try to do that, and then I'll make some closing remarks and we should be done. What time works? We're traditionally, or as limited as it's been, we're like usually 10 or 1 or morning or afternoon. Some thoughts, or I will throw out a suggestion. We do it at 10 o'clock.
I have it as 10 to 12 on
Me
my
too.
calendar.
Me too.
That's what I have too. Yeah.
Let's stick with that. And that meeting, I'm planning to have no new testimony from anybody. It's going to be pretty much going over the outline and what we want the report to be. I'll be working on, the Senator and I, and also we're kind of collaborating on the executive summary, which I'm putting together. And that's what one thing I wanted to get said today is a kind of a slant that I'm putting on this. Myself, I see this as really important work. When I started, I didn't realize the things that are involved with mobile homes and mobile home parks. And I'm kind of thinking that there's 3 big parts to this. One is affordability, just affordability of housing and the crisis that the state has with affordable housing, which I think this helps to address, and almost everybody acknowledges that. The one that hasn't been mentioned a lot is our lack of construction labor. And we have talked about that some, but the whole use of mobile homes and modular homes also is an ideal kind of a solution to our perhaps temporary labor difficulty with construction labor. So I'd like to stress our interest in mobile homes also as a solution to construction labor shortages in the state. And the third thing is climate change, which we haven't dealt with a lot, except we have with modern construction. So that in fact, promoting mobile homes and mobile home parks hits 3 of the primary crises that Vermont is undergoing right now. One being affordable housing, labor, and climate change. So I'm seeing that as a motivation, first kind of a thought on what we're working with here and the sorts of solutions that we're putting forth that will help address those 3 primary problems. And I think that'll give it some kind of raise its, people don't always think of that, and raising it up so that people will think, well, maybe there's more to mobile homes than just replacing them or just saving a couple of parks, or it's really the benefits are far wider than what people usually consider. So we'll be working on that. Any thoughts on that? I would love to hear from you as to whether you think that's a good idea or a bad idea. No, we really should keep climate change. No, we really should keep this out of it, or let me know about it. We have 10 days until the next meeting. I'm going to be getting documents to you, revisions and things like that, primarily of the executive summary, which I'm most concerned about in terms of how we're going to frame the whole report. And then we'll be able to give the attorneys the details of what's going to follow that. And so that's what I would really appreciate if you do get documents to give me some quick turnaround on them and tell me what you think of them as we're going through this, so we can be very collaborative in the whole building of this. What I see is could be a very important report. I also wanted to mention that there was talk of a kind of an advisory, another group that would be formed. And doing some research, I found that there was in 1969 an advisory commission on mobile homes that was reestablished several times over the past 69, 40, 30, about 60 years or so. And I'll be looking into that a little bit. On the website, on our documents and resources, there's a heading that says previous commission reports. And in that, you'll find the 69 report, as well as two more that were somewhat similar to us in that they were doing advisory information for the legislature and the governor. Things. They're kind of interesting reading, and you might look at those and think of maybe, is that something we want, or are there already too many groups that are working on housing? Most of all, I would like to get those groups that are working on housing to think about mobile homes, because I don't know if they all are. And I think that would be an important contribution that we could make. Okay, that's my say. Any thoughts before we wrap up, or otherwise we'll see you on the 15th at noon.
At 10.
10, sorry, 10.
Thank you.
10
Thanks,
to 12.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.